Happy Friday, March 5th. We are continuing to learn about ancient China today. Got some cool pictures of some Chinese architecture and statues. And our learning target is using my knowledge of India and China. Now I can label and color a map to understand the geography of the civilizations. And that is what we're doing later today after we go over your China reading guide. Okay. So, let's jump over to that answer key right now. So go ahead and, if you haven't already, pause my video, and I need everyone to pull up their reading guide. Thanks. So here we have at the top your unit vocabulary. So monsoons. Did anyone know what a monsoon was? It's a wind in the Indian Ocean in southern Asia. It's like a storm cloud. It brings heavy rains in the summer. We had the rivers, the Yellow River and the Yangtze River. Those are major rivers in China. Gobi Desert. It's a large desert region in Asia. Talked about what it means to be isolated, so complete separation. We have the dynasty. It's another name for like the ruling family. It's powerful leaders in China. Ancestor worship, we'll talk about that in our reading guide. Mandate of Heaven and feudalism, we'll talk about those as well. You have your Quizlet link right here that you always can be using to practice your terms. All right, so number one, let's jump right in. List 3 geographic features that isolated China from the rest of the world. All right, who got that one? What did you guys get? So, trying to do this cool white font technique, but I'm going to have to see that. Okay. 3 geographic features that isolated China from the rest of the world. The Yellow Sea and Pacific Ocean, which borders the eastern side, so the side over here. Mountain ranges are along the western border here. And then the Gobi Desert stretches across most of the north. So let's jump over to a map and let's look at that. All right, so here's my map in my classroom. Here's China. We have Russia up to the north up here. And then China's right here. So we have the Yellow Sea and the Pacific Ocean, which borders the east over here. This is the Yellow Sea, if you can see that. And then this is the Pacific Ocean here. Back to China. The mountain ranges are on the western border. So there's you can kind of see the topographical mountains. They're right in here. Okay. And then the Gobi Desert is all across the top in this Mongolian China region. That's where the Gobi Desert is. Okay, so you can see how the civilizations were kind of boxed in like this. Okay, great. Number 2, how could isolation help a civilization? So what are your thoughts here? How could a civilization benefit from being isolated from others? Well, you could have multiple answers for this, but protection from other people groups, okay? So there's no outside influences in your civilization. A lot of times when civilizations were nearby each other, having them kind of mingle with their different core values and cultures didn't really work, right? They're too different really to get along well, and so they ended up trying to take over each other's territory. Well, China didn't have any of that because they were isolated from the rest of the world with all these geographical features. So that was a benefit for them, it was protection from other people groups who were trying to invade them. And then their culture was really strong, right? And it was deeply rooted into their ancestry because there was no outside people kind of mingling or coming in. And then number 3, how could isolation hurt a civilization? Well, unfortunately, you couldn't do really a lot of trading with other civilizations. You couldn't, benefit from what other civilizations were building or their technological advancements because you weren't trading with them. You kind of just were in your own bubble, right? Number 4, what type of evidence do we have that has taught us about the first dynasty known as, I believe it's, all right, number 4, what type of evidence do we have that has taught us about the first dynasty known as the Xia? All right, so what did you guys get for this? We don't really have any evidence, do we? There's no archaeological evidence anyways. So how do they know about this dynasty? Well, legends and stories. Things were passed down from generation to generation. Specifically in one legend called the Legend of Yu. You hopefully read that in your chapter. But let's talk about Legend of Yu. What did he create to solve the flooding issue? Well, supposedly, and again, this is a story that was passed on, so we don't know if it's true or not, but he created a system of irrigation canals which brought the floodwaters into fields. Okay? And that solved the flooding issue. Number 6, we have a lot of artifacts from the Shang dynasty. What type of element did the Chinese work with during the Shang dynasty? All right, elements. We're learning about elements in science class. There it is. The element that they learned to work with really well was bronze, right? The metal bronze. And we're learning about that a little bit later too. What was the bronze really made for? And what was an advancement that they used with bronze, okay? The pyramid below is the social hierarchy of ancient China. So they didn't really give us in the chapter this many different people groups to add. So I just made something with the people they did give us. And so you have your king at the top, warrior nobles were below the king, and then your peasants and farmers were at the bottom. Okay. Those are the good, hardworking, honest folk, right? All right. Number 8, ancestor worship was important to the ancient Chinese. Explain what ancestor worship means. What does it mean? And I think of the movie Mulan when I hear this, and I don't know if you guys have seen that movie again, but Mushu, the dragon, is my favorite, and he is kind of a part of that ancestor worship scene where they're all in the little temple there in Mulan. But it's the belief that the spirits of their ancestors were always watching them and would favor them with rewards or bring disaster, depending on whether they were happy with them or not. So you were always kind of thinking, very similar to the Egyptians, you were thinking and you believed that even though people died, they were still with you. And, the Egyptians did bury them and had certain rooms for their dead. But they mummified them and they kind of believed that they were still part of life, right? And Chinese were a little similar, where they thought their ancestors were watching them and they would, favor them if they were doing really good or bring a disaster if they weren't happy with the decisions that they were making, right? Number 9, compare and contrast the ancient Chinese written language to the English written language. List 2 differences. All right, so 2 differences here would be the Chinese. They mainly had their language in pictographs, okay, which means pictures. So they had picture language, and it has thousands of characters to learn. And if you looked in your book, we'll go look at that right now. If you look in your book, you would have noticed that they had a specific character that looked like a tree, and that's what it meant. It meant tree, right? So look at this. So here's an example. This character right here means tree, and you can see how it's similar, right? So this is an example of how they had a lot of pictures as their written language. That does get tricky though. You have to memorize a lot. And what about like a color, like the color red or the color yellow? How would you describe or draw that? So sometimes they just had to make new characters, okay? So there's a lot of them, thousands. In English, however, we have 26 letters, and we put those in different combinations to make words, phrases, and sentences. So we use the same 26, but in a multitude of different ways, okay? Number 10, what dynasty believed that those in charge ruled by a mandate of heaven? You should have gotten the Zhou dynasty. All right? What does mandate of heaven mean? Okay, so this was defined in your chapter, and you should have written something like this. The mandate of heaven was the belief that the ruler would rule with the blessing of heaven. Okay, if the ruler lost the blessing, natural disasters would occur, the royal family would be overthrown, a new house would rule. So the mandate of heaven was very similar to the idea that the ancestors' worship. Okay, so it's the same idea where heaven was watching you as a ruler, and if the ruler ruled with the blessing of heaven, then it would be really good. It would be awesome. Life would be great. Everything would be going very smoothly. But if they started to get natural disasters, if a storm cloud came coming in, it's like, I'm not sure the royal family's doing so hot. The heavens aren't very happy with them. So, man, if you were a ruler during the ancient Chinese era, you'd really want to hope that you had good weather, right? Because if you start getting all these thunderclouds and famines, there's no food, there's monsoon rain coming. I mean, you might have to go, right? Anyways, so that's what the mandate of heaven is. Number 12, feudalism was the practice of granting the use of the king's lands to nobles in exchange for service to the empire. This practice was also used by what other continent? So that is basically the definition of feudalism right there. Granting king's lands to different nobles so that then they had to serve the king. The king said, I'll give you some land if you serve me for your life. Okay. This practice was also common in, does anyone know before they answered this? Europe. You're right. So Europe also did this a lot, okay, with knights, the Knights Templar. All right, number 13, list 4 technological advancements that the Chinese made. So these are very important. I hope that you got these, okay? So we have roads and canals, and that was really beneficial for trading. Money in the form of bronze coins. That's that use of bronze I was talking about earlier. So they had bronze coins now, right? We still use coins today. I mean, this was the first time that they really created bronze coins, right? Number 3, working with iron. So iron, super useful and everywhere today. And then 4 different farming techniques, okay? And then for the conclusion, now that you have read about each of the 4 ancient civilizations, answer the following question one more time. Does geography determine destiny? And please use 2 examples that support your answer. So I'm just reminding you here, you could have anything. It's an opinion question, but your 4 civilizations, just recapping, are Mesopotamia, Egypt, Indus River Valley, and Chinese, okay? Destiny, the definition of that is a predetermined course of events considered as something beyond human power of control. Okay, so it's beyond our power of control. But does geography determine that? Does where you live determine how your life goes, right? So that is your conclusion. Thank you for following along. And now you are going to do a little map activity, just like we did last week for Egypt. You are coloring a map. Please make sure you're following the directions in order so that the labeling goes really smoothly and then the shading goes smoothly, okay? And have fun with that, all right? Happy Friday. Have a great weekend.